Field trips.
There's one field trip in here. Mr. Pokin and 2 students who qualified for individual all-state speech are requested permission to travel to Cedar Falls on March 25th to attend the speech competition. Approved, they would return on the 26th. They would travel via CCSD minivan with Mr. Pokin as a driver. It's an overnight, and that's the reason it's before the board.
Any questions? Can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Gina,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Moving on to the all-state speech editions.
All right, well, the field trip you just approved is for these 2 young gentlemen here that have so graciously agreed to perform this evening for us. Thank you for allowing this. At Carroll High School, we have large group speech and we have individual speech. They are representing the individual speech tonight. First performing will be Miles Millard. Miles is the son of Candy and Dan Millard. And Miles has participated in speech, large group and individual, all 4 years of high school. This is his 2nd year as an all-state performer. The thing with individual speech is it's more of a festival than it is a competition. So the competition portion is finished for them. I got to see both of them perform at Kemper 2 Saturdays ago, and I know you are really going to enjoy this. The category that Miles is performing tonight is called reviewing, and in reviewing, I believe they have 8 minutes to review anything they would like. And I'll let Miles tell you a little bit about, I think you do that in your introduction?
Yeah.
Kind of?
Yeah.
Kind of?
I
And,
can talk about it as I'm getting stuff out though.
okay, perfect. All right, so Miles?
Alright. So, in the category of reviewing, yes, you do have 8 minutes to review pretty much anything you want. I mean, as long as it's school appropriate. And, you can use note cards if you choose to, you don't have to. I think a lot of the judges probably like it if you stray away from note cards.
Miles also has a concert tonight,
Yeah.
so,
Hence the drumsticks. Those are not part of the review. This other instrument is part of the review, though. Let me just make sure it's in tune. Close enough. Alrighty. So I guess, is everybody ready for the review?
you ready?
Alrighty. When we're young, we're often defined by the things that interest us most. These are things like art, literature, and music. As we grow, these interests tend to grow with us. For example, when I first began writing, recording, and performing music live, there were a good handful of bands that really kept me going. These are bands like Rush and Deep Purple, Sonic Youth, and lastly, Nirvana. Nirvana formed in the year 1986, and by the time of 1989 had released their first album titled Bleach, to admittedly little commercial success. However, this album does serve as a landmark and a forefather to the grunge movement, and possibly even music as we know it. This is by no means their most important release, though. 1992's Incesticide garnered significantly more attention by the media, and 1994's In Utero went platinum. But for those of you who are not very familiar with Nirvana, you might know them for their seminal sophomore 1991 release titled Nevermind. Nirvana's success is a glimmering beacon of hope for all mediocre guitarists. Because they've shown us that by only playing a few notes a song, and by singing pretty badly, you can become the world's next big band. And Nevermind is a testament to that mediocrity. Now, if you think that I've come here to praise Nevermind and praise Nirvana, I'm afraid you're mistaken. I've come here to bury it. The first track is titled Smells Like Teen Spirit, and honestly there's not a thing that I can say about this song that has not been said before. The vocals are pretty lazy. The structure of the song is pretty boring. It has about 4 notes in it that just repeat over and over throughout the song. It goes a little something like this. Now, that going just like that for about 3 minutes or so can get a little repetitive and get a little bit boring, as you can probably tell. Now, the lyrics of the song also are a key thing I'd like to talk about. The lyrics really don't make any sense at all. I mean, a mulatto, an albino, a mosquito, my libido, yeah. These are the kind of lyrics that we'll be working with throughout really the entire album. And back to what I was saying about the structure of the song being boring, and pairing that with what I'm saying about the lyrics, you could really make the songs about just about anything. I mean, there's a desk there, and some chairs there, and some teachers, hope they like me, yeah. The second track is titled In Bloom, and this is kind of a rare situation where the second is better than the first, but better doesn't necessarily mean good. Really, the highlight of the second track, though, is the music video. The music video features Kurt Cobain, who is the lead singer, and the rest of the band, dressed not only as Buddy Holly, but also dressed in drag, which is quite an interesting stylistic choice for a band like Nirvana to choose. The third track is titled Come As You Are, and upon your first listen you might think to yourself, hey, this riff is pretty good. It's nice, it's catchy, but by the time you've gotten back around from the chorus, and the riff is going again, you might wonder if the song looped while you stopped paying attention. The fourth track is titled Breed, and quite literally starts with Kurt saying the phrase, I don't care, about 7 times before getting into any other vocals of any kind. Oh, Kurt, you don't care? That was obvious about 3 songs ago. The fifth track is titled Lithium, and by now, to the listener, it might have become very apparent that either Nirvana makes absolutely no effort to name drop the title of the song and the lyrics, or it seems like that's the only thing they say. Now, while Nirvana never says the word lithium in this song, the chorus of the song is solely consisting of the word yeah, at various pitches and intervals. The sixth track is titled Polly, and it's a nice, slow, acoustic ballad, kind of a tender number, about a bird, I think. Really what it kind of comes off sounding like, though, is just an acoustic rendition of literally any other song on this album. The seventh track is titled Territorial Pissings, and starts with some unintelligible garble from the bass player. Now, I haven't said the bass player's name. That's because he's the bass player. They tend to not get that much recognition. That's okay, I can make that joke. I'm a bass player myself. The eighth track is titled Drain You, and admittedly has very little substance to it. However, the song does feature a nice breakdown towards the middle of the piece, which is the second quietest part in the entire album. The ninth track is titled Lounge Act, and I'm just going to be honest, I remember absolutely nothing about this song. Was it good? Was it bad? I hope it was short. If it followed suit with any of the other tracks on this album, though, it was probably just eh. The 10th track is titled Stay Away, and you remember back on track 4, how they said the phrase I don't care a bunch of times before getting into any other vocals? This song runs into a similar problem with the phrase Stay Away, and is, ironically, a track you should probably stay away from. The 11th track is titled On a Plane. Boy, is it plain. Really, though, the last couple numbers on this album are not all that bad. I mean, sure, track 11 does kind of come off sounding like some derivative amalgamation of the band The Pixies and Space Hog. Remember the band Space Hog? Yeah, me neither. The 12th and final track is titled Something in the Way. And this is kind of a nice, slow acoustic ballad, yet again, where Kurt Cobain is serenading us with some lovely vocals and lyrics about a fish and its lack of feelings. Now, while this is the final track on the album, wait a minute! There's a bonus track! There's a bonus track! Yes, after approximately 13 minutes and 51 seconds of absolute silence, which I might add is the best part of the album, you get a bonus track! Now, this bonus track is really just Kurt screaming in the mics while they have guitars that are most assuredly out of tune at this point, and just high-gain feedback wailing in the background. Now, I know I've poked quite a lot of fun at this band, made a lot of jokes about the album here and there, but seriously, if you're considering getting into Nirvana as an avid listener, and you're thinking about starting with this album, never mind.
Miles is a senior at Carroll High School. I don't know if I mentioned that before. Miles, do you want to talk anything about plans after high school?
I am planning on attending the Institution of Production and Recording in Minneapolis, Minnesota, starting in, I believe, September of this year. So, looking forward to that.
Does anyone have any questions for Miles?
All right.
Quite a bit to
How long
memorize.
did it take you to do that?
To make the
Start to
speech?
finish?
Well, I started, when did individual speech start?
It started right
Because
after.
February
within-
26th.
Yeah, like February. Within that first week, I kind of made an outline and wrote up the speech. And throughout it, some of the jokes and everything in there, some of the critiques have been evolving, things have been added, things have been taken out. The things that have been taken out were like kind of harder to get jokes, ones that were a little bit more like, you have to kind of like understand this reference to get it. And there's been plenty of jokes that have been added, just little bits, and a lot of it, thankfully were recommendations of fellow classmates where it's like, oh, it'd be cool if you kind of threw this into that song. Like the whole ending, the, never mind, ending with that line was, I can't remember, he's a freshman, Colin, who did the same,
Colin Schultes.
Colin Schultes. He came up with that ending, so. But it was way better than the ending I had before. The ending I had before was, I just kind of ended it. Nothing really special about it. So.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate
Thank you.
Yeah,
coming.
thank you so
Right.
much.
Yep, it's good for them to have different audiences, so.
Looking
Good
forward
job.
to performing this at Allstate and everything. Now, I hope everybody enjoys Demetrius' performance because it is really good.
Yeah.
I saw it a lot of times in practice. It's still fun to watch.
Yep.
So.
See you, Miles, thank you.
Thank you, Miles.
Excuse us.
Excuse me.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, our next performer, I feel like I'm the proctor in the speech room right now. Just to tell you a little bit about the setting that these kids have when they go in to do their performances. The judges are probably as close as I am, and there's 3 of them just staring at them, along with a room full of spectators. And the room is usually pretty small and kind of hot. So this is a little different audience than you're used to. Demetrius, too, is a 2-year participant in large group and individual. He is also 2-year All-State, so he went last year in group mime
Mine
and this year in individual.
and public address as well last year.
And you went
3
for
times.
2. Excellent. Thank you. See, that's a good thing he's here. He also has, he is in the category of public address. He has up to 8 minutes. They also can use note cards. You'll notice that he does not have note cards. And students are required to give sort of an interpretation of a famous work, and that is what he is going to do here. So, Demetrius, you want to give a little background? Mom couldn't come tonight.
Yep.
But, so he's flying solo here.
This speech is a little on the serious side, so it's JFK's inaugural address. I picked this speech specifically because it it's kind of like what's going on right now in the world. A lot of countries are going against each other and not getting along with each other, and this speech is mostly about we need to come together as a whole. So I picked this speech because of that. So,
Okay.
guys ready?
Yeah.
Madam Vice President, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chief Justice, and my fellow Americans. We observe today not as a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. For I have sworn before you today, in Almighty God, the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago. In these troubled times, we do well to heed to the hopeful words of President John F. Kennedy's inaugural address. This world is very different now. The For man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet, the same revolutionary beliefs our forebears fought are still an issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. We dare not to forget today that we are the heirs of that first revolution. Let the word go forth from this time and this place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoings of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed, and to which we are committed today, here at home and around the globe. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, protect any friend, and oppose any foe, to assure the survival and success of liberty. To those nations who make themselves our adversaries, we ask not a pledge, but a request that both nations begin a quest towards peace before the dark powers of destruction unleashed by science engulf all humanity in a planned or accidental self-destruction. We dare not tempt them with weakness, for only when our arms are sufficient beyond doubt can we be certain beyond doubt that they will never be employed. But neither can two great and powerful nations take comfort in our present course, both overburdened by the cost of modern weapons, both rightly alarmed of the steady spread of the deadly atom, and both racing to alter the uncertain balance of terror that stays the hand of mankind's final war. So let us begin anew, remembering on both sides that civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. Now, all this won't be done in the first 100 days, or the first 1,000 days, nor even the lifetime of this administration, nor even our lifetime on this planet. So let us begin. In the long history of this world, only a few generations of Americans have been granted the role of defending freedom in its maximum hour of danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with another person or another generation. The faith, the energy, and the devotion that brings us to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from the fire can truly light our world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what you can do for your country. Ask what America will do for you. And so, my fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you. Ask what we can do together for the freedom of man. Finally, whether you are a citizen of America or a citizen of the world, ask of us here of the same high standards of strength and sacrifice we ask of you. With a good conscience, our only true reward, and history, the final judge of our deeds. Let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking His help and His blessing, knowing here on earth God's work must truly be our own.
What do you say to that?
What's your process to develop that? I mean, it's a lot to memorize, and it's has to be on point. You can't just make your own thing like
Yep.
Miles did. What's that like for you?
It's hard. It's a lot of, yeah, I remember it in a weekend. It took me a while, just, here's how I do it. I read a paragraph, I read it again. I read the next paragraph, I read the first paragraph, and then I read the next paragraph again. I just go do that, and if I mess up, I start right from the beginning. It's very cutthroat with me. I have to remember, I have to remember, because you're supposed, you can have note cards, but it's not really wanted, so.
Ms. Bass actually started working with Demetrius at the very beginning. Do you have anything to say?
I will just say, when you talk about his process, like, ultimate success is the goal, and he will settle for nothing less. And when that's what you start with, there's just nowhere to go but up. From the day one, you walked in and you're like, I'm doing this. And so I was with him at the very raw parts. Mr. Polking gets to take all the credit for the coaching that is that finished product, but it's just impressive. That's just Demetrius. When he approaches this, it's an all or nothing approach.
Did you watch any videos
I
of
did.
JFK's? Yeah.
I did.
So did you model some of your
Some of it,
inflections?
yeah.
And
Yeah, I put emphasis on words like when I said,
Start over.
when I said that we are the heirs of that first revolution, he said that, and then he used the words heir, that we, and then first. JFK was kind of good at getting words down that people caught attention of. And I guess I'm good at that too. So.
One of the things that Mr. Polking told me that they expect from these types of entries is that they are not modeled directly after the original, that it's their interpretation of it. He's very convincing. I will tell you, in the room that he gave his presentation at state competition, it was this quiet, and the judges were not writing because they couldn't take their eyes off of him. And so
I had one of the judges' comments. She said, "It's like you wrote it yourself, and you're presenting it in front of everybody." They just absolutely love. One judge said, "This is why I'm a speech judge. I just, it's good to see those comments after a good long day of practice, hard work."
do you get ratings at Allstate, or is it just a presentation?
It's
You've
just a
already gotten
presentation,
your
yeah.
ratings and you just go and it's
Yeah.
kind of
You get a
a
medal.
show.
You get a medal.
Cool. Kind of takes the pressure off a little bit.
Yeah. And then also at Allstate, I can have as much time as I want. It's not really a time. I can use the whole speech if I wanted to. I don't think I want to.
All right, anything else for Demetrius?
Thank you for coming, you did an excellent
Yeah, that's
job.
great.
We have some very talented students, that's for sure.
Well, and this is just two of them, but who wouldn't want these two and others to represent our school district? They do a very nice job, so thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you, guys.
Thank
Future
you.
plans?
Oh, I plan to attend DMAC and UNI to get my bachelor's in elementary education.
Teacher.
Yeah.
So, all right,
All right.
thanks, Demetrius.
Thank you, guys.
Culture PLC team.
All right, I'll let members of our Culture and Climate Committee or team share who they are and what they do at Carroll Middle School.
Some of us have note cards, we aren't.
I'll be the timer.
I'm Peggy McDonald. I teach 7th and 8th grade reading.
I'm Christina Miller. I teach 4th through 8th grade art.
I'm Ann Kluver, instructional coach at the middle school.
Rachel Menken. I teach 7th and 8th grade English.
Hunter Harmning, I'm the juvenile court school liaison.
Jesse Strong, I'm the 8th grade special education teacher.
Tom Borchers, 7th grade and 8th grade social studies.
Cinnamon Wolf, 7th grade special education.
And we have Caitlin Kaufman, who's our math teacher. She is not here with us tonight. And we also have Christy Peters, who is a guidance counselor, and she's not here with us, but makes up our team. This happens to be our mission statement for Carroll Middle School, just to start off. And our culture climate team, as we've shared. I'll give you a little brief history of how we got started. Our PLC lead team got together this summer, and we thought something that would be important to look at would be our culture and climate of the Carroll Middle School. And when you put a team together like that, obviously the goal is to improve your culture and climate. And so members of our team, many of them anyway, went to the 2017 Summit on School Climate and Culture, and you can click on that link and it will show you what the summit was like. But had a great opportunity to listen to some quality speakers on culture and climate, and brought back with us information that we can share with our staff. Our culture and climate team got together following being at the Culture and Climate Summit, and we put together some professional development that we shared at the beginning during pre-in-service days with our staff. And I can have Peggy share a little more information upon going to the summit and so forth.
Going and listening to all those wonderful speakers, as he said, is really the easy part. You get very inspired, and then you have to come back and figure out a way to implement all that. And one of the big things that I took away from that, and I think our team did as well, was just that you have to start day one. And the big idea, I guess, was building relationships with our students, that is the first and foremost way that we can potentially change the culture and climate to be more positive in our school. And so we were really encouraged by our administration, given the okay by our administration, encouraged other teachers to perhaps step back a little bit on those first days and not worry about opening textbooks necessarily. Especially, I think that's important for the 7th and 8th grade teachers who only see students for 40 minutes at a time. We don't have all day long with them to get to know these kids. So we really took a lot of time those first days that we were back, getting to know kids, letting kids know about us, telling a little bit about our personal life, maybe our experiences, what we like, pet peeves, hobbies, things like that, and giving kids a chance to share some of those things as well. Kids respond well to short activities, fun, entertaining things, so we tried to lighten it up a little bit on those first days and not worry so much about covering any material, just getting to know each other. And then the real challenge beyond that is continuing to build on those relationships, which we are working as a team to try to find ways for our school to do.
Simon and I are going to jump in on this chunk. So we last spring gave just our 7-8 students kind of a survey because we wanted to get some feedback from the students themselves on what they thought, and from the staff as well, about culture and climate. There's a link there that kind of goes through some of the things that Simon and I are going to talk about. And so from that spring survey, we decided to go to that culture climate conference as kind of a stepping off point, because one of the first questions that we asked was about whether or not the rules around the building are clear, and the same with all teachers, and we asked that of both students and staff. And so this summer, the lead team went through the handbook and kind of made some changes and really looked at how we worded everything and made sure that things were consistent. And we're also kind of throughout this year kind of continuing to look into some different behavior supports or programs that can kind of help us make sure that we are all across all grades using the same language and expectations for our students.
So the second survey questions we kind of looked at were, my teachers care about me, my teachers care about what I have to say, my teachers listen to me. And while overall, I mean, we were over 95% that kids really felt like that was happening, we didn't feel like that was enough. And so like Peggy said, based upon that culture climate summit that they went to, you know, teachers were told to step away from academics and really get to know our kids. And we thought that that was really, really important this year with our 7th and 8th grade level, since this was the first year that teachers were teaching 7th and 8th grade. You know, prior to that, we had our 7th grade pod and we had our 8th grade pod, and you saw the kids on a daily basis and you interacted with them a lot more. But since we were doing a lot more switching, it was really important to build those relationships. We only have homeroom for about 10 minutes in the morning, and it's really hard to really establish those relationships in that 10 minutes. And so we really wanted to focus on that so that the kids did get the feeling that, you know, we're just not there for a job, we care about them, we care about who they are and what they have to offer us.
And then a few of the questions kind of chunked into one on that next box, asking the students if they felt like they had a voice in decisions made around in the school, whether or not they took pride in their school and had strong school spirit. And at the end of last year / through the summer, we kind of talked about revising the process for getting into student council, so that it wasn't necessarily just the students voting and it kind of turns into kind of a popularity contest. So we revised that process, and we also made it so that more students could be a part of that. I think before it was just one per homeroom, and now I don't know if it was, I have 2, I'm not sure if there was a limit or if it was just however many kids were interested. And I think that's something that we want to continue to improve on, getting that student council involved in some of the other things you'll hear about as far as the incentives and the celebrations that we're trying to do to increase the culture in our building.
The next question was, other students misbehaving at school is and then the kids got to pick big problem, somewhat of a problem, or not a problem. And this is an ongoing area that we're continuing to work on. Our lead team, we actually had a presentation this afternoon about PBIS and implementing that at the middle school level and what that would look like. So that's an option that we've thrown out there to look at, you know, to help with school-wide behavior so that expectations are the same everywhere, no matter where kids go. This year we've also had teachers at all grade levels have created a list of students for whether it's the administration or Ann or Hunter to visit with regarding their behavior. So we looked at kids who we see ongoing behavior. They kind of divided those up, and they're having individual conversations with each of those students to see what we can do to improve that. Ann and I are going to go to a behavior conference at the end of the month, and we're hoping to bring back some ideas, you know, to improve behavior with that. And then we have a few teachers looking into a book for a book study to bring new ideas to help with behavior.
One of the questions was asking about whether or not they thought CMS was kind of a welcoming place that promotes school pride. And so our newest addition, when you walk right into the building between like the office and those outer doors, there's like a display case that we are kind of brainstorming ideas on how we can spotlight students or positive things going on with our kids.
So then we wanted the kids' input on what would be meaningful ways that we could celebrate and reward students for their positive behavior. And Rachel's going to elaborate on this a little bit more here in a minute, but we've added incentive days 4 times a year. So kids, based upon grades and behavior, get to be part of an incentive day. We've changed our Student of the Month assemblies. It used to be a 5-8 assembly, and the kids were kind of saying that they wanted those spread out a little bit. So we've switched this year to, we have 5th and 6th grade assemblies, and then we have 7th and 8th grade assemblies. And then teachers are working on making positive phone calls home to parents. So, you know, a lot of times we call home and we say, hey, your kid was bad today, and we wanted to kind of turn it around and catch those kids being good. And, you know, a lot of times it's those kids that are sometimes known for behavior, and so calling home and say, hey, just an FYI, your kid had a great day. And so we're finding that that's making a positive difference also.
And then a couple other questions had to do with whether or not they felt like teachers had high expectations and willing to help. And again, as Cinnamon stated, we had high percentages, but because it wasn't 100%, we felt like there was room to grow. So specifically at the 7-8 level, we added a catch-up day within the actual school day to kind of help make it clear that the work that is assigned is not optional. It's an expectation that it will get accomplished and achieved. And so the teachers weekly look at who's missing any work in their class that's impacting their learning, and those kids get that work finished. And then back on that slide was the picture of the display case that we're promoting.
This was this, I'm trying to think, was it in the fall or the spring so far, or over the winter? We attended MTSS meeting in Des Moines, and one of the things that we were looking at is how are we going to track kids for being at risk or certain behaviors, things like that. And so we ended up with getting the idea from other schools that are already operating with a early warning system just to identify items. And so we picked certain indicators that we thought would be important for us. Course performance right now, we could include a lot of other data, but right now we've kind of limited it to some things that we have on hand. Absences, office referrals, our NWA testing, and the Iowa assessments. And then we've kind of set a level of cut scores where, you know, we're on track, and this is track for success would be in the green area. We may be a little bit off course if we have something in yellow. Maybe it's, you know, if we look under just course performance, 1 or more D's in any class, and then off track is failing one or more courses. And then we take a look at all the different categories for each student, and we, you know, are looking to see, are those students, you know, are there certain things that we're noticing? Are they D's, and we've got office referrals, or in coordinating some of those items? And I think Ann's going to talk a little bit more about those when we take a look at this.
So we're collecting all of this data. This is actually data that we are already collecting, but putting it together to look at this at a systems level for our entire building and make decisions to make sure we're meeting the needs of all students. One of the things we learned through this training is you can't intervene your way out of all problems. If it's affecting more than 80% of your students, or if your success is at less than 80%, you can't intervene your way out of that. So that tells you need to fix that at a systems level. So we're using that data to determine how to best meet the needs of our students within our building. And then from the systems level, we can also look at it at a grade level as well to make those decisions, and that's just the next slide. And then also take it down to the individual students to see if you have a student with a red area, we want to make sure we're addressing that concern. If they're yellow, they're at risk, so we want to make sure we're meeting those students as well. So we're ensuring that no student slips through the cracks with our early warnings data that we have to make sure, like starting next year from day one, we'll have this data from our students to know what students what do we want to be seeking out right away for some additional support. Maybe it's in behavior, maybe if it's in attendance, and so we know we have a connectivity issue. So we want to pair them up with a teacher or make sure that they feel that they're connected to school. If it's their academic performance, we know that we're going to watch those kids right away and provide them the support rather than waiting for them to fail to meet their needs.
Can I stop you? I'm not familiar with the 80% can't intervene your way out. Can
Okay.
you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so if for example, if your attendance is fewer than 80% of your students are in the green, you have a problem. That's a systems level problem.
An individual criteria,
Yes, so
not if 20% of your students are at risk.
No.
No, it's you looking at the system level. So we know we need to fix something within our system. Trying to meet with each one of those students is you're not going to get what the result that you need because you have a bigger issue than an individual student
But you're
issue.
looking at the individual criteria percentage,
Yes.
not the number of students that are at risk in any one criteria.
An intervention is going to be done with a small group of students or a student, and so you can't do an intervention per se if you have to intervene with 40% of your students. Then it has to be a systematic
I just
approach.
wasn't sure
Yeah.
if you were talking on the total number of students that fell into any one category, or you were looking at
The
one
individual.
criteria at a time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the last thing I guess it's not the last thing, but going back to the survey that Cinnamon had talked about, and she also talked about going back to building some of our climate and culture within the middle school. One area that we really wanted to beef up would be how we celebrate our students and our staff members. And in order to do that, we realized that we needed to make some changes to our assemblies that we had. Before, we hosted assembly once a month, and as Cinnamon had said, the younger grades, they felt that they weren't, it's a little intimidating when they're having to go up front with 100 and some 8th graders staring down at them. So we decided to split them up, and we decided to have 2 assemblies, and we called the assembly Tiger Pride, so just showing pride within our building and pride for us, as Carroll tigers. And, the teachers then are the ones who decided what kind of activities those students would take part in. And the other area that we looked at would be incentive days. And this is to happen 4 times a year. And in order to be a part of the assembly for these incentive days, you would have to qualify. And in order to qualify, we looked at their behavior. We also looked at were any of those students failing a class or having missed work. And if they did, then they did not qualify. Instead of being a part of the incentive day, then they had kind of like the catch-up, as Jesse had talked about. Then they would work on getting their work made up. And then the other area that we looked at is how can we better celebrate our staff. An example of how we've done that at the beginning of the school year, we had a little social time in the media center where we brought in cake and we just had a time to, celebrate one another.
Yeah. And I want to add, I know that we had this discussion, I've had this discussion after the last incentive day. Nothing is perfect right now. This is the first year we've done some of these things. So we're looking at, ways to improve the things that we're working on right now, what we're doing.
Hunter, go ahead.
Okay, so someone had mentioned that we are also checking in with some of those students who have more than one behavioral referral in the office. So Jerry, myself, Corey, and Ann check in with a list of different students who have a number of behavioral referrals, and just check in to see how the students are doing, how their weekend was, how their behaviors are in the classroom, what ways they maybe feel that they can improve their behavior, how maybe we can help them out to make sure that they are making steps to improve their behavior. And then in December, I went to a training to start teaching aggression replacement training classes. And so I have 3 of those right now, and they take place during the student study halls at the middle school. And the art groups is what the group is called. And it focuses on 3 key areas. So social skills training, which is dealing with things. Like an example is dealing with someone else's anger or responding to failure, different skills like that. And the second component is anger control training. So teaching kids how to recognize when they are getting angry and then give them skills to help kind of calm themselves down when they are getting angry and help them to deal with their anger so it doesn't get out of control, so it doesn't get them in trouble. And then the last component is moral reasoning training. So we'll read like a moral reasoning story and then go over different ways that you can handle the situation and kind of problem solve that story. And so we meet twice a week, as I said, during the kids' study halls, and hope to continue doing this as well throughout the years to come.
Hunter represents the entire district, but he's housed in the middle school, so we take full advantage of his services and use them with our middle school students. But just to give you a real quick finish here, we meet approximately 2 times a month, sometimes more often than that. And Ann's an instructional coach, and like I said, we have drawn from the counselor, Christy Peters, and so forth. So we will continue to meet, and I think Cinnamon said that she mentioned something about the PBIS training. We are looking into that. March 29th, we have a gal from AA that will be presenting to our entire staff, and I see us moving forward with that in studying it, putting a team together for next year. So, thank you, everyone. Any questions that you have?
Just a question with regards, like when you meet with students, when during the day are you doing that?
During their star time or study halls is the time that we...
Are you finding enough time to address, things for the students you're working with, or it's just, how's that?
Sometimes some students take more time than others. I find that sometimes I'm responding to behaviors too when I have a relationship established with a student who's in the moment having a behavior. So some students we meet with more often, multiple times a day sometimes. It's hard to work it all in with all the other things that we have going on, but it was something we just felt like we had to make a priority to make happen.
So often the students that have behavior concerns, it's a vicious cycle. They also have academic needs, and so you're trying to pull these kids to work with them for interventions. You're trying to help them have a relationship. You're trying to give them skills for this and that. So there really is, there are never enough minutes in the day, but you try to, without taking from core instruction, find them when you can.
I know when I taught it at PBS school, we didn't call it PBIS, and we had learning labs at lunchtime, which is very similar to the training that you were talking about, Hunter, and it really did make a huge difference within our climate and culture with the kids, and for the staff to understand what the expectations were, and why those students were in the learning labs to begin with. Now, Anne, do you find it hard, since you're an instructional coach, if you're being pulled out to do behaviorals, do you feel like you're not getting enough time in the classroom with the teachers in that role?
If it's an issue of being in a class, I mean, I don't respond to the behavior in that moment if I'm co-teaching, but if I am working with data or doing other work, then I'm able to go and do that. So it's not pulling away from my coaching duties in that regard.
And we did look at the number of students that each one of us serve, and so Ann doesn't have as many students that she works with compared to Mr. Heim and myself or Hunter.
And like Hunter said, a lot of times we try to pull them in star time or even before school. Right now they're inside a lot of times, so I try to grab my kiddos during that time when they're not in a class or anything.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Any other questions?
Any questions for the board from any of you?
We appreciate the opportunities you give us to go to these trainings. We know hiring subs and transporting us is not free, so we appreciate that.
Like Tom said, we're a work in progress. If you have input or your kids come home with input and ideas, let us know. We're willing to make changes.
Send us an email, show us what you guys appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Public forum. Donations.
Shout-outs first.
Yeah, I missed that. Shout out.
Several shout-outs for March. Carla Flattery would like to give a shout-out to Brooke Kirkhoff, who's doing an amazing job with her student. She's a teacher associate. Her student had a difficult year last year with behaviors and learning. This year, he's so much more calmer and more focused. Brooke is showing patience and kindness with a student who really needs it. Peggy McDonald wanted to give a shout out to Brett Lindgren and the people at Central Copy. They absolutely amaze me with how efficient they are, whether we sent something through the school, snail mail, or by email, it's always here on time and done right. Heather Cornelius wants to give a shout out to Linda Lingle, who's always being so flexible. She goes above and beyond to help all the kiddos out. No matter how challenging the day may be, Linda always walks away with a positive attitude. Kayla Strasser would like to give a shout out to Nancy O'Brien and the CMS kitchen staff for all the ways they have served our students and staff this year. Thanks for the smiles, the words of encouragement, and the good food. She'd also like to give a shout out to Ann McCartan. Her job is constantly challenging, especially this winter. She's handled all the sickness, injuries, and other difficulties with kindness and compassion for each student. She listens patiently to each concern and keeps our students in constant supply of ice packs, Band-Aids, kind words, and smiles. Thank you, Ann, for all you do. Alan Lowe would like to give a shout out to Natasha Adams for all her time and effort she put into Read Across America Week, which was February 26th through March 2nd. It was a fun week. Carrie Ladehoff wants to give a shout out to Lisa Honnold for supplying supper for the CMS teachers on Monday night during conferences. She also wants to give a shout out to Hunter Harmony. Hunter makes himself available to help wherever he's needed, giving kids a ride home after school if they don't have rides, picking them up if they miss the bus, and helping with students when no one else is available, etc. Sue Ruck wants to give a shout out to Kevin Kirsch for all he's done to transition to the day custodian position at Fairview, to Sydney Circovich and Keith Peterson for incorporating Fit Step pedometers into their 3rd and 4th grade physical education classes, and to Cindy Nelson, Jeannie Hansen, and Kim DeWorok for all they do to support students, staff, and parents. And Clover wants to give shout outs to Caitlin Kaufman. Caitlin works hard in her classroom, but also goes above and beyond to do things outside of school, such as create alternative schedules that work for a variety of reasons, or organizing students into groups for catch-up day, incentive day, and other activities. Caitlin is one I know I can go to if I need to think through a project or a plan for logistics, so we can make it happen smoothly. She's just simply the way of figuring things out to make them work. We are lucky to have Caitlin at CMS and look forward to her return from maternity leave. Ann also wants to give a shout out to Patty Machart. Patty is a dedicated and hardworking teacher. She truly knows her students and understands what they need in order to be successful. Her mama bear instincts are evident in her classroom, caring about each student and giving them what it is they need despite any challenges they face. Patty also has dedicated much of her time to be on the middle school science curriculum team as well as the K-5 reading curriculum team. Her dedication is noticed and appreciated at CMS. Ann also wants to give Hunter Harmony a shout out. Hunter's work with students who have become our highest needs at CMS is always appreciated. He has stepped up in many ways and helped with many of our students who have concerning behavior. Hunter communicates often with families and with students on expectations and holds them accountable. Hunter has started small groups in order to positively shape the behavior of students who could benefit from that. He has earned the respect of the students and staff at CMS. We're so glad to have him. Julie Chumbley wants to give a shout out to Kevin Kirsch. He's always so willing to help out when asked, whether it's getting the table and chairs for conferences, scooping the sidewalk for recess, or filling the cleaning spray for us preschool TAs, or anything else that pops up now and then. He also does it very quickly with no complaints and a smile on his face. Thanks, Kevin. Karen Monaco wants to give a shout out to Russ Funk for his ability to spread happiness and positivity throughout CMS. Russ brings sticky notes with inspirational words of hope and happiness and randomly passes them out to staff. It's a joy to come to work and see the great message to brighten your day. Thanks, Russ, for this. She also wants to give a shout out to Kayla Strasser for always being willing and happy to help out with any situation that comes her way. Kayla has helped in the media center with the Christmas party, with shelving books, setting up and working the book fair. Kayla has been moved around CMS this year and brings a positive attitude wherever she is working that particular day. She is a kind and listening spirit to the kids that need her. So, congratulations to all of those folks that received a shout out this month.
I want to make sure that we acknowledge that the central office staff, Diane and Mary, especially with all their extra work over the past month and a half when we were preparing to hire a new superintendent, and also it continues with the AD and the transportation director. They've done enormous amount of work for that, so thank you for that. Donation.
This month, the Carroll Rivalry Cup Incorporated would like to donate $1,000 to the boys and girls golf programs at Carroll High School.
Get a motion to approve it?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the donation.
Second.
Dwayne?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Gina?
Yes.
Next, we have the personnel report.
Contract modification of assignment. Renee Willie Carter wishes to transfer from her current food service position to an 8-hour custodial position that is open at Adams Elementary. Renee was hired to work in food service 7 hours a day beginning January 9th, 2018 at the wage of $11 per hour. Jeff DeWart is recommending Renee for an evening custodial shift at Adams Elementary, 8 hours, 3 p.m. to 12 a.m. at the rate a pay rate of $11 per hour. Approval of the transfer is recommended effective April 2nd, 2018.
I'll move to approve the recommendation.
Second.
John?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Gina?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Ooh, right on time. Next, we have the public hearing for FY18 budget amendment.
You've received 2 copies of that. The first one that you have that looks like it has the publication on it. Crumple up and throw away, please. That one was for an earlier board meeting that we had scheduled in February, which was postponed, and so the postponed meeting didn't fall within the required timelines. So we had to publicize the meeting or the amendment, and that's why it's on the agenda tonight. And so, just a short explanation. Most of it's self-explanatory here. We're increasing the instruction from $3.877 million to $14.25 million because of purchase of instructional materials. There's a few things that were purchased that we probably wouldn't have planned on doing, some textbooks and things of that nature, so we're just, you got one shot at amending your budget, so you wanna make sure that, if it needs to be amended, it's probably gonna be pretty close, but, Gary felt more comfortable, upping that one a little bit. Total support services went from 5.64 million to 5.85 million. Most of that was due to the purchase of the 2 school buses back last year at this time. Those weren't on our radar of purchasing 2 buses, and so we have purchased those, and so now we have to amend the total support services for that. And then the other category is which really drew our attention to amending the budget, is because we published last year 7.981 million, and now it's 14.75 million, and that has to do with refinancing the bonds. You're showing an expenditure of paying that note off of $6+ some million, and so that kind of blows your budget out of the water, so to speak. The budget amendment has nothing to do with increasing taxes. It has nothing to do with anything else other than informing and certifying to the people, to the taxpayers, that we're increasing the amount of spending. And that's really all it is.
So for the instruction, the materials, those have not been purchased yet, we're just putting them in there in case something.
Some have been purchased and some probably will be purchased before the end of the fiscal year. And if they're not purchased before the fiscal year, we're still safe.
Questions? So we'll go ahead and open the public hearing at exactly 6:30.
Any comments?
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 He always makes me wait a minute at least.
Well, that clock's going right.
Yeah, we'll just go by that. We'll close it at 6:31.
We need a motion to
Yes.
approve the amendment. I'll move to approve the budget amendment.
A second.
Brad,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Jen.
Yes. Next, we have the administrative reports. Harley Davidson, I saw the picture that you sent out.
All right, some of you might think that Ms. Bass is here because she's taking National American Government. She is filling her requirement, but actually she is here to partner with me on this presentation. And I believe that this opportunity has come to us partially due to the foundational work that Becky has laid over the past, I don't know how many years, starting with problem solution projects, and then the employer educator days, and she works relentlessly to try to create partnerships for external businesses and teachers. In fact, we have another day coming up, April 11th, where we also will have a Department of Education Career Tech Ed community college person here to be a part of that day as well. So great things are starting to happen as we look to serve our entire population of kids. As you've heard me before at nearly every monthly presentation, I always talk about college and career readiness. We have a higher percentage of students at Carroll High School that go to 2-year technical schools than do 4-year schools now. And we also have some students starting to take advantage of internships and opportunities that the state has been touting. So the day that I was in my office and I got a phone call from Harley Davidson, I thought, oh great, my do-rag and chaps are in it. No, I did. Actually, no, I didn't think that, I already have those. But anyway, a gentleman called and said, have I got a deal for you? And I thought, I can't believe that, we've worked so hard reaching out to people and now someone is calling us. And he talked about this program called Harley Davidson First Class and how the corporate office was encouraging the retailers to reach out to school systems in their communities and offer students some authentic learning experiences. And so as I was taking all of this in, I asked him, would he mind if we called back when Becky could come and listen to this? And she had the same exact reaction I did, like, oh my gosh, this would be amazing for our kids, but how are we going to make this happen? I thought, okay, every kid here has a full schedule. We've got kids that are in activities, they have jobs, they are so busy, but we tried as hard as we could to come up with some different ideas. First and foremost, I thought, I gotta see this for real. You know, I was a little bit nervous, so arranged for Becky actually to go out to Harley-Davidson for an hour or so and visit with them and actually get an idea of what areas they were talking about. And there's those 21st century skills that I'm going to have her speak to here. The owner of the Harley-Davidson shop is actually a 1977 graduate of Carroll High School. And quite a neat history that goes along with Harley-Davidson, which I won't bore you with, but they've been going strong since 1975. So they're a pretty well-established business here in Carroll that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily know unless you missed the turn to Fairway and went there. But I'll let Becky talk a little bit about what you gleaned from visiting there, as well as the structure of what Wade presented to you in regard to what our students can take away from this.
In my role, it's really kind of fun to explore when the classroom goes outside of the four walls of Carroll High School. And we know more and more of our students are looking at different avenues, different pathways, and the more that we can give them the tools to make that happen, the better our students and our community will be. And so there have been traditional things in the past that are set up through a class, through internships, or it's momentary one-day job shadows, but this was kind of a new, innovative idea. And so they said, why don't you come out and see what this is like? And so I kind of did a mini day, and I got a run-through. Now, they have devised a curriculum for the class, and it includes interviewing, and the interviewing process will be attitude, demeanor, resume writing, and soft skills. Now, they call it their motor clothes division, but it basically is customer relations and sales. Marketing and media is social media, photography, and creativity, how to manage that ethically in the workplace. And then they do their own in-house financing. So if you wanted to buy your Harley, you can apply for a loan through them. So they're going through the finance and the insurance. They're going to teach the kids about credit, health credit applications, approvals, denials, and warranties. Now, when we first talked to Harley, we didn't really think that was going to fit like a mainstream student. That would be a very niche market of our students. But after learning how they have kind of devised their curriculum, it would actually meet the needs of many of our students. They want to run this 20 class days for an hour. We've worked out some of the logistics if we would get approval. And they want to do it with at least 3 students to pilot to start, and at most 6 students at a time. And they're willing to run this continuously. And so if we have an interest, they have an investment. And that's kind of an exciting prospect. It is kind of a new way to pursue this. It's new skills. I really think it's commendable if students do it. It'd be giving of their study hall time. They won't be receiving class credit. It is really learning for the learning, the knowledge. And the benefit, hopefully, is that that's a two-sided coin, because our community is going to make an investment in young people who might find that this is where they want to stay, or they can be business leaders, and they might have some new ideas that will kind of keep building and regrowing right here in Carroll. So that's when we knew we kind of wanted to explore it, and they couldn't wait for tonight to happen, because they would love the green light to get moving and get started. They'd like to start already this spring, and would be happy to work with them if that's something that we get the green light to move forward on. I forgot to mention, their final graduation requirement is they don't want that to be a celebration just for the student. They're going to have them do a culmination night where they have to have 10 people in the audience. It can be family, friends, teachers, principals, school board members, I'm sure would love to come. But they're going to showcase all of the skills that they learned in that internship, and that will be the final step, and then they will actually get a certificate of completion for the in-house internship program through Harley-Davidson. So So there it is.
Right, so as I was thinking, oh my gosh, who will do this? And immediately in my mind, I thought, well, beginning of the day, end of the day. So, because kids automatically popped into my head that I thought would be a perfect fit for this. And so we pulled the first hour study hall list, and we pulled the 8th hour study hall list, and by gosh, those kids happened to be in either one of those. Well, then we started looking at 8th period, and I think we've come up with a female and 2 males.
We're very interested if we decide to pursue this.
And I thought I better run this by Mr. Cordes first because, you know, you start thinking about liability and traveling and all kinds of things like that. And I think we're covered. We would have, of course, parental permission to participate and to drive off campus during the school day. And as you can see, Harley is going to get a t-shirt for each one of the kids that participate. They are so excited about this, they can hardly stand it. So basically what we are here for is to field any questions from you, and we'll go from there.
Any cost to the district?
No.
So Harley's, they're the folks there are the ones that are doing an hour of teaching and training for it. Is there a reason they wouldn't come do that in the school? Versus down there versus...
Well, it's really on-the-job training. They want to get them on the floor, working with customers, doing relations. They want to get them actually doing some of the online marketing. They want to show them how to read a credit score, how to get credit scores, how to apply approvals, denials. I mean, it is a very hands-on, authentic approach.
I think it sounds great, to be honest with you. I do, I think what runs through my mind is what other business, if this is successful, what other businesses in town can you approach with this kind of a model?
You know, the neat thing that's happening too, I mean, Becky's been contacted by multiple different businesses. The hospital wants to come in and bring curriculum into classrooms. We have heating and cooling.
That's this Friday.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all of a sudden the floodgates have opened. And the one thing we heard from, I believe, Iowa Works, that most schools are very hesitant to let people in. It's just unusual for them to accept that, whereas Carroll High School we've been very welcoming, and it's starting to really pay off now.
Your thoughts are like mine. I really think that they could be piloting something that other business models will actually learn from. And so the approach is much different. 10, 15 years ago, it was really, really hard to get our kids into businesses. The trends have all shifted, and we are contacted on a regular basis from people who want to get in the door, who want to talk to our kids, talk about opportunities. We just had somebody come in from John Deere and was offering to pay for all the schooling if certain kids go through a certain line of work, and they're guaranteed a job when they're done. I mean, these opportunities, now I know I'm getting old, 20 years ago we talked, you were lucky to get an unpaid internship, and you were supposed to be grateful for working 60 hours a week. And that is just not the case. Our kids have a lot of opportunities, a lot of choices, and my goal is to get all of those options in front of them, and so that they can make great choices and invest in their futures. And truly, from what we're seeing from businesses, they're wanting to get in the door before, I mean, really probably by sophomore, junior year, they would really like to, if a kid has an interest in a certain area, they would like to reach out to them. So it's a really great trend in education right now.
How did you pick the students? Do they have to have certain qualifications or qualifiers with them?
You know, it was just kids that we thought, okay, this student might find this interesting, but actually the 3 students that have popped up are... we knew logistically we were working with 2 times a day, really. To be able to give them an hour, it's kind of limited to we don't affect their class load, because we can't do that. And so we just pulled those study hall lists, and I just kind of went around and said, okay, is there anyone who would have an interest? And I sat with little groups, and the young lady who had an interest
I hadn't even got to her table, and she was eavesdropping on my conversation, said, I'm interested, and it was just like that. I mean, I didn't really have to work real hard to get that interest.
So are you looking to do this like at just the first or ending study hall, or are you looking to have two groups if there's enough interest in kids?
See, this is where we get a little tricky, because they want a full hour block of time. So we can make that happen with the flexibility of having them come in, early or late. We get to the middle of the day,
Right.
and that it just doesn't work without affecting their class load currently.
Right. But as far as would you potentially want to do the first hour
Oh, yeah.
and a second hour at the same time?
They're
on
willing
the
to take
same
up to a 6-student work load, and so we thought, just starting out, we'll pilot it with 3, which is what they want to just have a minimum,
Okay.
and then we'll get through that first group and kind of figure it out from there. But absolutely.
I'm thinking like if you had 8 kids that wanted to participate in something, that was work.
Mm-hmm.
Would you want to do it during the same 30-day block time period, or would you want us to stagger it?
I
Start it?
completely coordinated with them,
right.
and because we're really piloting something new, I think we're going to learn as we go through this experience.
I think
But yeah, it's a great thought.
Anything to develop in customer relations, the resume writing, the soft skills and that, I mean, it's, that hands-on will be huge for those kids.
Is there a grade point average that these kids that would be interested in, I mean, they have to maintain to participate in this program?
Yeah, that's a great question. We didn't set a stipulation on that, but I can tell you all of the students currently are in good standing.
And Harley doesn't have any stipulation, they don't have any, these are, they're looking for interested kids and.
Right. I mean, when you think about the fact that these kids, not one of those kids said, well, what's in it for me? Am I gonna get a grade, am I gonna get credit, am I gonna get
Am I gonna
paid,
get
am I
paid?
gonna get
Yeah.
a motorcycle?
Maybe a free ride.
That's right.
It'll be interested to have the kids come that finish their first 20
Yeah.
weeks to the
Mhm.
board and say what the experience was like.
Well, the general manager wanted to come tonight, and we said, you don't need to come tonight, it'll be all right, but he's
Very excited.
very excited.
I'd be interested to follow those kids too and find out like where they land a
Uh-huh.
year
Yeah.
from now,
Mhm.
5 years from,
Are these all seniors?
No.
What grades?
One is a senior and 2 are sophomores.
Okay.
And if it'll turn into a job.
No,
Yeah.
we'll start as soon as we can, we'll start.
Right.
Gotcha.
No, we'll start as soon as we get the green light and, we get parental permission and to drive and be off campus.
It's good PR.
We'll start
Well, I moved
20
to,
times for an hour piece, I'm sorry.
oh no, that's okay, I was just gonna move to approve the Harley Davidson internal internship program.
Gina?
Yeah.
Dwayne?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Jerry, you can't do it.
We all get a t-shirt though.
A t-shirt. I'm sorry, I have to go
Thank you for
to
coming.
concert,
Thank you.
so.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Bates.
Next, we have the transportation director job description. This is the job description that was modified. Rob and Tom modified it, and then it was sent to the principals to give feedback and Kevin to give feedback, and this is what came up. We wanted to get this approved before we did the screening interviews last week, and then interviews will be coming up in the next week or so. Any questions on that? Can I get a motion to approve it?
I move to approve the transportation director job description.
Second.
Dwayne?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Gina?
Yes. Jen, we'll change that date of approval and revision date at the end where something will, right? Like right now, it has revised May 2000.
Yeah, once it's
Yeah.
approved, Mary Ag changes it
Okay.
when she does the final. I think she takes off all the crossouts, doesn't she, too? Next, we have the cooperative sharing athletic programs.
Each year, we approve cooperative sharing of athletic programs with Neighboring districts, those are listed there. Not on your agenda, but was added later today, was Coon Rapids Bayard will have a soccer player, so they'll participate in soccer with Carroll High School. Carroll High School is the host school for girls soccer. Carroll High hosts girls swimming, girls golf with Arweva, boys swimming with anybody that happens to get on the bus. Wrestling, ICAM Manning is shared with Carroll High being the host school. Boys golf with Arweva, boys soccer with Arweva and Glen Ralston. Boys cross country, Kemper is the host school for cross country tennis, girls cross country and girls tennis. And so we would ask that you approve all of those, and you can do that with just one motion.
Just out of curiosity, do some of these pairings bump us up in classes according to different sports?
No, because there's one class in swimming, I believe. The one wrestling does. I've talked to Mr. Nagel about that, and he's okay with that right now, anyway. But the other ones, I don't believe they do.
Pretty much same list as last year, isn't
Yeah, with the addition of.
it? With the addition of Coon Rapids for soccer.
Yep.
Rob, what happens like when they're going away for a meet and we send, like if they have to stay in a hotel or if they have to have meals? And does the home district pay for the individual kids, or whoever hosts, do you pay for all the kids?
Whole school pays.
So that can be pretty pricey if we have a big share lot?
We've had that happen. One time we were gonna bill for swimming. It was more of a headache than was just paying the cost. And so, the other side of that coin is that, swimming especially, I would say is that we wouldn't be able to fill all of the events if we didn't have the numbers that we have. As many of those places may send one or two swimmers. And so in order to fill a team, typically a relay goes, it's certainly not impossible for all of those kids to be on or from a district other than Carroll. But typically there would be a Carroll student involved in that, and we would be getting a room anyway. It may, we might have to get 2 rooms. So I would tell you the additional cost certainly is the sharing outweighs the additional cost, in my opinion, by far. Because we would probably not have swimming if we didn't share with, I'm not saying we didn't share with all of these, but if we didn't share some of that, we probably wouldn't have enough.
Any questions?
I move to approve the cooperative sharing agreements.
Second.
John? Jen?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Gina?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Okay, business office report. First one we have is FY17 audit.
We're not going to do that tonight. Gary's not here, and so we're gonna table that until
Okay.
next month.
Budget reports, FY18 budget report.
Yeah, the one that begins with sales tax on it, you can see the sales tax revenue is coming in as expected. Believe it or not, we did not have any expenditures this month other than the transfer that goes to debt service for revenue bond payment later this year. And so we have subtracted all of those out of the total, and so there still remains about $1.5 million in there. And so some of that will obviously be used this summer for various projects, and we'll get into that a little bit here in a little bit. But that, obviously, that fund remains pretty healthy. On the physical plant and equipment levy, the 33-cent board-approved levy, $175,000 balance, and as of the bills being paid today, $11,406 was spent. You can see there was a little bit of revenue in March, a majority of that will come in April, and then in May, as taxes are due here in March. And so, the early taxpayers, we got their money, but, the ones that pay on time, will get a little later on, and so. And then, I would call your attention to the voted physical plant, the 67 cent. The revenues there are really, I wasn't sure how to show this. I wanted to show that the proceeds from the bonds, but really that escalates the balance somewhat, simply because what you're doing is you're paying those bonds, the sale of those bonds, off by the revenue that comes in yearly from the 67 cent levy. And so, and obviously that's only a one-time deal. You can see there that 44,752 was the cost of issuing the bonds. In the back sheet, it kind of gives you a listing of all of the revenues and expenses for the stadium construction project. And we did, in fact, got a bill this morning for the contractors at $181,726. So we wanted to make sure we get that paid. Just a reminder that the contract amount, the amount that's paid to Covenant Construction, is $5,444,000. We've paid $1.1 million of that so far. The total cost is obviously the other cost of doing business in something like this, whether it's asbestos removal or architect services or what have you. And so right now that project's at $5.8 million, and we've paid about $1.7 million. So, any questions over that? Feel free to give me a holler, or certainly take them now if you have any. The other.
Did they get it tented?
I haven't been down there since I've been back, and so I was doing transportation thing part
Just
of it.
any surprises on bills at this point on the stadium, anything that's kind of coming in? I know we had the electrical, some lines had to get moved, which was $10 or something like that, but just curious if there's anything come up that you said, say, this is.
We got a change, well, it wasn't a change order, but an estimate for additional engineering services today for, if we move forward with it, which I don't know as if we have a big choice, of $4,500 for the engineering of putting air conditioning, heating into the press box.
Yeah, that's pretty small.
But other than that, I mean, everything else on here, I would tell you, is there's really no big surprise. You know, and I don't mean this in a mean way, Gina, but the attorney fees for this type of thing, which, you know, they have a template on, because we know that for a fact, when you receive your first copy of it and it has another school district in there.
What?
And say, well, we're not this district.
Should have used you, right?
That, you know, that's, to me, that's just a lot of money for the shuffling papers. And I know it's more than that, I get that, but it just irritates me.
Right.
And then, of course, the selling of the bonds, I think that's,
Yeah. It's a pretty good commission on the bond.
so. The other budget report you have is,
Nobody has approved
pardon me?
Nobody approves the income and
No, it's
expense.
just information. These are some projects Jeff has put together that he would like to see done, and most of these are a continuation of some work that we have begun already. As you can see, they're phase 2 of window replacement, and then obviously if you replace the windows, many of the windows have blinds inside them, and we're replacing with windows that do not. And so you have to replace those as well, and then some of the trim around some of those windows is marble on top of the concrete block, and so that runs into some cash. The stage floor really needs to be replaced, and we've gotten a couple of bids on that. the gym floor, refinishing and repainting the gym floor. As you get, it looks okay from a distance, but as you get on there, you can see is some of the paint has been sanded off through the process of each year of sanding it. And then we're also gonna try to lighten the floor up a little bit color-wise and make it a little bit brighter in there, and so.
That's something we talked to about, the idea of sort of maybe getting rebranding done, maybe delay that a year, that part of it, and then just do the necessary painting.
Well, what I've been told, is some of what goes on the floor now is, what do I wanna call it?
Like a sticker?
The sticker type material that, for example, if you watch the state tournament at Wells Fargo, when the boys played there, they had their logo on the floor, when the girls played there, they had their logo on the floor, but it's still the floor of the Wild, or the, whoever plays there, the Des Moines.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that isn't, I don't think that is a big deal, but, the biggest thing, it's so dark, the floor itself is so dark because of using a, what's the base that they use that gets it dark, it's more of an oil base finish as opposed to the water base like Fairview is. So, we wanna bring that back a little bit. Concrete replacement has to do with some trip hazards where concrete is unlevel and just some replacement of some bad concrete around various buildings. And then just some painting that needs to be done around different places. The bus barn wash bay is kind of rusting, that metal is rusting out, especially towards the bottom, and so this replaces that. And then the softball field needs some drainage in the infield there, so it gets rid of the water faster and it doesn't sit on the field and cause problems. So right now we're estimating a cost of all of those things, $277,000. I've given Jeff a budget of $300,000 to work with. That's probably a little less than what we have in the past. I would tell you that's probably pretty conservative. Craig has been given that number, a little bit, I think $325,000 for some updates to technology as well. That's pretty typical each year to spend between $300,000 and $400,000 with that. I'm just a little bit leery moving forward simply because of some of the cost of the stadium, and not that I'm not expecting it to run over, but at the end of the day, bond payments still need to be made, and so there has to be money for those. And so there certainly is enough other projects that could be done throughout the district, but we also have to be able to manage the projects that we have going on, and so.
So before he goes forward with like the repainting, would he make sure that we, if they decide to rebrand, that we have that taken care of before he goes through?
Yeah.
Do you need a okay for this?
Yeah, I would, because it's basically what you're doing, is accepting the bids that we have in here.
Okay.
So I would prefer a motion.
Move that we accept the 2018 summer projects bids
Probably better put a maximum dollar value on
with
it.
a maximum of $300,000 budgeted.
Second.
Jen,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Can he look to see, Rob, I know the fifth grade pod, there wasn't ever blinds in there. Last year I noticed there wasn't blinds either. Can we look to see before we order new if we need to get fifth grade? So that sun
For the
comes right
east
into
side,
the kids,
for the
yeah,
east side.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the teacher said that, I just said talk to Jeff and get it on his Sunday list.
Okay.
And I don't know if that was included in this blinds for windows or not.
I don't know if it may be, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll talk to him.
Because they have some issues with kids, you just can't see in here. It's, first thing that first period, it's pretty bright.
next we have food service. Sarah.
Hello, and Diane's gonna help me with this one too, because this affects her. So, we have to try to explain this to you. It's not an easy topic. Rob and Gary don't like this topic either. I have kind of a flow chart here. Why is procurement important? First of all, Congress established these laws, then they sent them to the USDA. The USDA sent them to the Office of Management and Budgets, then they came to the state. If you flip it over, the USDA state, and then this is everything we get to do at the bottom. Complying with the OMB super circular, complying with the USDA program regulations, complying with USDA guidance and administration, complying with state, local regulations, policies that are not in conflict with federal regulations. So, I had gone to a training. Gary had talked to several of the business managers about this procurement training, or this procurement policy, as to why we had to have a separate policy, because we already had all the board policies in place. Why do we have to? Because they say that we have to. So there's no getting around it. We're getting reviewed. The state audit for the food service happens every 3 to 5 years. We're at the 3.5 year mark, and they're coming at the end of April. There are still several schools that have not done it. I basically took the checklist with Diane, and we don't even know if we did it right. There's not a lot of guidance to it. There's a lot of confusion. That's why some of the schools still have not done it. And we filled out the little chart that you guys got, and with the state's Excel plan that they sent out, we had to have version 2013 of Excel just to even work on this plan. My computer was 2003, Diane's was 2007, so we had to buy 6 new versions of Excel just to be able to fill in their little template. And then,
Tell them when they come in April, we'll bill them.
the first part of the plan is the first thing that you guys see, that is basically saying that the Carroll Community School District is going to adopt and comply with all of these rules and adopt this plan. The second one, it explains it and has Rob's, mine, and Gary's signature on it, saying that that's what we're gonna do. And then the third tab was the Excel spreadsheet that you guys were looking at. Basically, it's what Diane was already doing. She was already keeping all the expenses separate, but they're making us classify everything as a small purchase, a micro purchase. They're formal, informal, if we're in a buying group.
So a lot of those numbers came from board policy, right?
Yeah, everything that we had referenced what we're already doing. There was a Buy American clause, and we're already fulfilling that by being a part of the AEA purchasing group. They did identify like 3 products that weren't Buy American: olives, mushrooms, and pineapple, and they've since switched to an American company on those. So there's just several different rules that we have to comply with to be able to buy anything in the food service department, which we were already doing, but they made us double the work, and Diane and I had to filter through everything and adopt that plan. So in our opinion, you guys are adopting that Excel worksheet and that first page that says Carroll Community School District, that first paragraph. And then there was 9 tabs, I believe, in the Excel spreadsheet that basically defines everything. A micro purchase is anything under $3,500. A small purchase is this. If you're gonna do this, you have to get 2 or 3 bids, and everything we're already doing with the milk bid and the bread bid and so on and so forth. So I need you to formally adopt that plan, and then we will clarify when the lady comes in April if we have to guesstimate how much we're going to be spending every year in that plan, because in one part it says estimated, like we're estimating how much milk we're going to buy, we're estimating, and then if we need to come to the board in July or August and give you our estimates for the year, and if you need to adopt our estimates as well as the final plan at the end of the year.
And these numbers are from fiscal year 17, okay?
Which they are reviewing 17.
Yeah, that's what is getting audited next month, so.
It's not
like the government to make more paperwork.
It's, Rob helped me answer some of the questions and they're just unbelievable as to what they want to know. So,
If you're not right, Rob will visit you in jail.
Me too.
sure.
Any questions? No. Can we get a motion?
Yeah, I move to approve adoption of the food service procurement plan.
I'll second.
Brad,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Jen.
Yes. Well, that was interesting, Sarah, thank you for.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, nice job.
It was not fun.
I'll be able to sleep better tonight.
We're protected.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Next, we have the FY19 budget work session.
To start with, well, you should have a additional packet in front of you. I'll begin by going through that first, and then we'll go back to the presentation. The first part of that, first several pages are the presentation. Page 1 is the page that actually gets sent to the county auditor, which property taxes then are based off of. Page 2 is actually what gets publicized in the paper for the budget. And one of the things that we'll need to do tonight is to set the time and date of the hearing. I had put in there April 4th, but that isn't going to work. And then basically the third page is the same as the second page, only bigger so you can read it accurately. And then the adopted budget summary there shows the actual of 17. Those numbers are right off of the certified annual report. Then we re-estimate what we're going to receive and what we're going to spend for fiscal year 18, because we're not through that yet, so we can't say, yeah, this is exactly what we're going to spend. And then we estimate budget for 2019. And so really 3, 4, and our pages 2, 3, and 4 are basically the same. Pages 5 and 6 is the re-estimate. That's where the numbers come from for the various funds. And we re-estimate what we budgeted last year. So last year we look at those numbers, and then we re-estimate where we're at. And one of the things we had to add in there is the refinancing of bonds, and it's one of the reasons you amended your budget tonight. And then you have the budget worksheet for budget year FY19 and for the various funds. Page 9 just lists all of our long-term debt for this year. You can see there that we're paid $675,777 from the voted PEPAL loan. That'll come out of those dollars, and then the revenue bonds that were refinanced, a payment of $612,168 will come out of sales tax revenues. And page 10 just breaks it down by each fiscal year. You can see that the refunding bonds are paid off in 29/30 with a $280,000 payment then. And then the capital loans, the newest one on the PEPAL loan of $5.2 million is paid off in 26/27 on page 11. Pages 12 through 22 is when you hear us talk about the formula. This is really the formula, and this is the aid and levy worksheet for the district. And 14 years ago, when I started the superintendency, there were many of those numbers you had to enter. And now the way the Department of Management has it is you enter about 5 numbers, and the aid and levy worksheet's complete. And I would tell you, I don't think that's best practice.
Why is that, Rob? So you just have set amounts of money for?
No, it has, part of learning the process of the budget is learning where the numbers come from and having them make sense. And, you know, with the way it is now, it's, if you know your valuation, you know your enrollment, so you can double check those. You know whether you have a 33-cent board approved levy, you punch that number in, and whether you have a voter PEPAL and how much it is, whether you have an instructional support levy and what percent, and whether there's a income surtax, you're pretty much done.
So it's just become more automated.
It's
than-
very much more automated, and like I say, I think it's a lot more difficult for, Gary and I were talking about it, you know, we're using Forecast 5 because they really have, all of our numbers are in there, and a lot of the data is extracted from out of there. In the budget workshop we went to, you know, we were talking on the way back, is that if I was a first-year superintendent, I wouldn't like the process that's used right now. And because you don't have to do any of the math. You know, the Excel worksheet does the math for you. There's one thing you don't want to get wrong, and that's the tax rate. If the tax rate's wrong, there's a big problem. And so, we've had several eyes on our budget simply because we've worked with Forecast 5. You know, just going through that aid and levy worksheet line by line, I think there's some merit in it. And, you know, anymore they're just drawing the data from, whether it's the state reports or whether it's your own accounting software or whatever. Yes, it's much easier, but if there was a taxpayer sitting out there and says, where does this number come from? You ought to be able to answer it. And there's a new process. I'm not sure you would unless you're going to go through it line by line. That's just a little speech. And then 23 through 26 just gives you some history of tax rate, cash reserve levies, what the district has levied for PEPAL fund over time. You can see that has bounced around at different times. And then the district's assessed valuation history. So that's just a little bit of an overview as far as the process itself. Obviously, there are some budget deadlines and timelines that have to be met. The budget does have to be published, as the board knows, at least 10 and no more than 20 days before you have the budget hearing. So once we decide tonight when budget hearing is going to be, we have to make sure that we get it publicized in the paper at least 10 and no more than 20 days in that window. The board adoption of the budget, the official hearing is typically the same day you have the hearing. You listen to anybody that may question the board on the budget, and then the board typically makes a motion to adopt the budget right away. And by statute, that has to be done this year prior to April 16th because the 15th falls on a Sunday. There's a requirement of notice of successful elections, whether it's an instructional support, whether it's physical plant and equipment, Carroll, which is often referred to as a playground levy. The interesting thing about the Carroll is once it's voted in, it stays in until it's voted out. And so there are very few districts that have that anymore. Budget guarantee resolution, the district will not be on a budget guarantee this year. If we were, we would also have acted on that tonight, have had a motion to participate in the budget guarantee. And then we have to certify it with the Department of Management in the county by the 16th of April. And the FY18 budget amendment resolution is no later than May 31st, but before exceeding the budget. Now, I will tell you that in the budget of the FY18 audit, if the auditors catch it, you'll have a note in there that the board did not amend the budget prior to overspending. And that had to do with the reason of the sale of bonds and the timing of that, and then getting snowed out and things like that. So there isn't anything that's going to happen other than you'll see a note in the audit that make sure you do it before.
Make sure it doesn't snow next time, it's good.
There you go. So the certified budget, this terminology is right out of the Iowa Department of Education Finance manual, and the certified budget's a document showing the amount of taxes that's going to be levied for each fund and or program, and the aggregate revenues and expenditures. Has to be certified by the local board no later than April 15th, and for the upcoming fiscal year after holding a public hearing and adoption. A line item budget is much different than that. In fact, our line item budget typically is not completed until late April, or excuse me, late October, and maybe even early November. And that's an internal document that's used to manage the budget and to make sure you know where you are financially. It's not required by law. I would tell you that some schools don't use a very detailed line item budget, which I think next year they're in for a big surprise, simply because you have to report, FY19 you have to report out by facility, and many districts aren't doing that right now. We do currently, to a certain degree. We don't know the specificity that we're going to have to do that through, because they haven't said that. Whether you're going to have to break out all your utilities by building, things like that. I hope they don't do that. I think it's ridiculous. Diane could probably tell you more about the line item budget than I can, to be very honest with you, is because it goes down to the basis of chart of account level, and so it's pretty much pretty detailed.
Yes, it's every account that we have in the system has a budget, and like Rob said, Gary usually does it October, November, and then I take care of entering it and posting it and give the guys the reports they need,
And that's obviously what the principals use on a monthly basis. Is when somebody says, well, I'd like to have this for my classroom, and they have to know whether or not they have money budgeted for that purpose or not. And when I teach a finance class in February, it is FLIC, one of the things we talk about is that if somebody came in the room, in the boardroom, and asked the board in September, after the CAR is done, how much did Carroll Community Schools spend on elementary reading? I think that's a fair question as a taxpayer. And if we have goals for reading, math, science, your resources should match up with what the district thinks is important. And so I can tell you there are districts that can't answer that question. They couldn't answer that question because they don't have their line item budget defined to that level. And so now you can forget everything I just told you about line item budgeting, because that's the last time we're going to talk about it tonight. Tonight's discussion is about the certified budget. It is the bigger picture of things. And what you're really certifying for the public is you're informing the public how much the district can spend in all funds, not just the general fund, but in all funds, from July 1 of 2018 through June 30, 2019. And we'll go through those in just a second. You're also informing the public of the property tax rate that will be in effect from July 1st, 2018 to June 30, 2019. And you'll see where that is on the form. Expenditures are certified to the public. How are they identified? They're identified in 4 categories. We've kind of talked about this before. Instruction, total support services, non-instructional program, which is food service, and then total other expenditures. And in fact, if you want to go to page 2 of your booklet, you will see those on lines 23 is the instruction line. 31A is the total for support services, which includes lines 24 through 30. There's nothing on 31. Non-instructional programs is line 32. Other expenditures is line 35A. is a total which encompasses lines 33 through 35. Total expenditures is on lines 36. So what we're telling the public, unless there's something the board wants to change, is that the district will spend no more than $15,172,750 in instruction, no more than $6,628,500 in support services, $1.1 million in non-instructional programs, and $5,347,559 in the other category. This is how the certified budget gets monitored on a monthly basis. You didn't have it tonight simply because payroll hasn't been posted. And without payroll posted, this report, because that's a majority of our expenditures, really doesn't do the board much good. But payroll will be posted tomorrow. We'll update this and we'll send that out to you. If you look at that report each month, you can tell, and this is how we tell whether or not we're projecting of whether or not we need to amend. And, you know, we kind of forgot about it, to be honest with you, with the refinancing of the bonds until we started plugging the numbers in. Oh, yeah, we gotta, you know, we should have done that before we paid that note off and closed on those bonds. But, you know, it's just, it's one of those things that's kind of out of sight, out of mind type of thing. How's the property tax certified to the public? It's a total tax rate for all funds. Combined, the rate requested is a total tax rate and not by individual funds. Now, we'll break it out for you by individual funds, but the tax rate that you certify is a total tax rate. What are we informing the public of but not certifying? We're informing the public of the actual revenues and expenditures for fiscal year 17 because we know what those are. We know what we received. We know what we spent through our certified annual report. We're informing the public what the expected revenues are and expenditures for fiscal year 18. Again, since we're not completed, you know, we're about 75% through the fiscal year. We don't know how much yet, but we can anticipate. And then we're informing the public the expected revenues for all funds for July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2019. What do you see is missing from number 3?
Revenues and expenditures.
You don't see anything about expenditures in number 3 because you're not informing the public of expenditures. You're certifying. You're informing, but you're also certifying and saying, this is the max. The key variables for the revenue, and really the big part, if you will, of the formula, student enrollment, that pretty much drives our budget. Preschool enrollment is a big player anymore. The supplemental state aid, whatever that percentage is, that hasn't been much in the last few years. Dropout prevention, you can see there that that's increasing $124,000 for next year. And the reason for that is that we have spent carryover money for the last couple of years. And now there's not enough carryover there in order to fund that program. And so when you have carryover, you're not allowed to levy as much as the program costs. Instructional support levy at 10% with an income surtax of 3%. We're not allowed to levy any cash reserve this year. Last year we levied $605,000. And because of the expenditures to our carryover revenues, we're not allowed to this year by code. Taxable valuation, you can see, went up 3%. The TIF taxable valuation went up 15%. Regular PEPL rate is still at 33. The voter PEPL is at 67. We do not have a surtax on the voter PEPL. It's 100% property tax. And the management fund is increasing $350,000 this year from last year. And the reason for that, again, is that's been by design, is we have spent that money down. We've had a pretty hefty carryover in management the last a few years, and we have levied very little dollars for that, and now it needs to start building up. Expenditures by various funds, you can see there. Now keep in mind, this is based on the certified budget, not necessarily what the district is actually going to spend, but you're not going to spend any more than this, which is an increase of $1 million over last year. Activity fund is $20,000, management fund $235,000. The big two would be there, the physical plant and equipment levy. That has to do with expenditures on bonds. Debt service, same thing of refinancing the bonds. Food service is going to be about the same, $52,000 difference. But the big difference in the total, obviously, is the refinancing of the bonds. That's a majority of it. Revenues by source. One thing that's obviously concerning here is the general fund revenue, actual cash, is $326,000 less. The reason for that is the growth from the formula is not as much as it is when you include the $605,000 that we levied for cash reserve last year, which is just cash. It's not spending authority, but it's cash. You're not allowed to do any of that, so the difference between those two is that $326,000. Nothing there. Management or activity account, $20,000 difference. Management fund, $366,000 difference. Sales tax, $22,500. That probably mostly is due to increasing 22 students, and sales tax is paid on the per student basis, and it's right at $1,000 a student. Revenue for physical plant equipment is going to be less because of the big infusion of revenue in fiscal year 18. Debt service, the same thing. Debt service saw a big revenue windfall because of refinancing bonds. Food service is $16,000 difference. And again, the $11 million difference is mostly due to the refinancing of the bonds. It's still, at least to me, it's some bothersome of the general fund revenues being down $326,000, but there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you're not allowed to levy cash. You're not allowed to levy cash. It's just the way it is.
So you mentioned that? Explain that a little bit.
Sure. If your revenue or if your expenditures the previous year, so expenditures in FY17 are, is it 20 or 25%? Do you remember? I think it's 25% of your revenues, and you have that left over, then you're not allowed to levy cash reserve. Because what the state is telling you is you have enough money. You're not in the banking business, so therefore, you just can't go out. It's basically it's a method by the legislature to reduce property taxes because it's been in place now 4 or 5 years.
Well, if I remember right, the general fund last year, we surplus.
Right.
Surplus.
And that's the reason why you're not able to do it this year.
Yeah.
Going back a year before, we could have levied, I think it was right under $1 million.
Yeah, I think it was 1.2 was the difference.
Could have been, I couldn't tell you exactly. But a lot of that has to do with now receiving 100% of the instructional support levy.
Right.
Whereas in the first year of that, you only received the property tax.
portion of it. So I remember Rob and Gary being pretty
Happy.
very happy when we got to the year end.
I don't know what I did.
Our expenditures and receipts were in great shape.
Property tax projections by fund, you can see there over the last 5 years. This, for fiscal year 18, the general fund rate is $9.11. Management fund will cost 67 cents. The PEPAL is $1, that's both the board and the 67-cent voted. And so the total tax rate for the district is $9.78. $9.79, so it's about a 58-cent reduction from the previous year. I would guess, if I was to make a prediction, that unless there's certainly some unforeseeable circumstances, I would tell you that I think the district's tax rate will hover right around that $8 or $9.80 to $10 range for the next 3 to 5 years. Of course, that, obviously, if a big plant would move into Carroll and build a huge plant of some type, that could influence that. 500 windmills going up inside the district someplace could influence that. There's a lot of factors that could influence that, but based on what I've seen over time, I don't think it's going to probably change a whole lot. And there really isn't any mechanism the district has to change that. I mean, you can only levy so much in management. I mean, you're not grounded by the statute to doing that, but you only can levy as much as you can't be levying $1.5 million annually for the management fund. I mean, the taxpayers aren't going to stand for that. And you have the instructional support, which is already in the general fund. Unless you run a debt service and build something, that's probably about the only way you're gonna be able to raise money, to raise taxes, I should say. These are the dollar amounts that those levies generate. The 540 you can see is generating $264,000 more than it did a year ago. The additional levy is down a little bit, and that has to do. The reason the uniform levy is up is because valuation's up. So the 540 is generating more dollars this year than it did, or next year than it did this year. Okay. The additional levy is something, again, the legislature has their hands in the cookie jar on, and that's affected by the commercial and industrial rollback. And I will question, and I will be shocked if you see that portion of the money next year, because that's a discussion topic in the legislature right now of doing away with that. That is a bigger problem for cities and counties than it is schools, because the schools will get some of that back through the formula. Cities and counties, they're just out. They're just out of that. And so, dropout prevention dollars for $412,000. The instructional support is $466,000. That's $17,000 less, and the reason for that is that income surtax is more. But again, that commercial and industrial rollback is affected by that. There's about a little over $16,000 that's supposed to come in from commercial and industrial replacement. I don't think you'll see it, and that's not in here. So
do we need to rebalance that, Rob? So that's closer to 50-50?
You can't get any closer to 50-50 than it
Close
is.
as you can.
Yeah. I've tried to do it, put it in 2%, and I tried to put in 4%, and it's 3% is still as close as you're going to get to 50-50. again, the breakdown of the taxes for each one, 540, the additional levies cost and $1.83. Again, that has, a lot of that has to do with that commercial and industrial rollback. Dropout prevention's costing about 43 cents a thousand, 46 cents for the instructional support. That's just the general fund. So really what you're approving for publishing tonight, and this is the actual publication form, and that's why you can't read it very well, and you can't read it very well in the newspaper either when it's published because of the size of it, which is on page 2 of your booklet. You can see it in there. This is the revenues, the top part of that. It's on page 3 of your budget booklet. It's broken out by year there, and again, you have the actual for 2017, re-estimated 2018, and then the budget year of 2019. So really what you're approving for publishing is expenditures, the instruction line, which we've gone over all of those, and then the total tax rate at the bottom. Remember, you're only certifying the requirements, the revenues you are, the resources you are basically just informing them of what we estimate of receiving. This just breaks it down by category. So our recommendations from Gary and I would be to approve the proposed budget. Includes $412,296 or 43 cents a thousand for taxable valuation. For modified allowable growth, $650,000, 67 cents a thousand for the management fund, $335,000, $13.33 a thousand for the board-approved physical plant equipment levy, $675,777 or 67 cents for the voter-approved, $466,087 or 46 cents for the instructional support, the property tax portion of it, plus there's 3% that comes from the income surtax of $505,000. Proposed tax rate for FY19 is based on 1% of state supplemental aid, and that has been approved and signed by the governor. Tax rate of $9.79. 1036 is where we're at this year, decrease of 57 cents. After the work session, we should have a motion that moves that Gary publish the proposed budget as presented for FY19, hold a public hearing, and set the date and time for that public hearing. One thing that I want to point out for you on the instructional support levy is on page 19. On line 10.18 is really what the district is supposed to get total, which is different than what we actually get. Because on line 10.19, $174,171 is state aid that we're supposed to get. In other words, if the legislature fully funded the instructional support levy program, you'd receive another $174,171.
They haven't done that for several years.
They haven't done it for several years. Now, if you go down to line 10.24, that's even what you're supposed to get with it rolled back at, I can't remember the percentage, but and you're not getting that either, by the way. So you're not getting the million, you're getting the $1 million minus the $28,738. So
We've never
They-
received it though since I saw that.
No, and you didn't count, you knew that from the
Yeah,
start, you didn't
right.
count on it.
Back in the first time we ran it, we were, and because part of the problem is if every other district's hands in that cookie jar, how come ours isn't grabbing our share? Well, then a few years after that, I think it's probably been 8 or 10 years now that they haven't funded it. The irritating part of that is that they don't give you the spending authority either. And I think they should. And what they should do is allow you, if your public allows you to, is go back and recoup that. If they really cared about education, they would say, well, then you have the authority to do that if you so desire, and if your public is you know, supportive of whatever you're levying is your tax rate, then you should be able to do that. I'll worry about that when I'm governor. Questions from the board?
So we need to pick a date, Rob?
Yes.
You said 10 to 20 days?
The window has to be, once we get it in the paper is when the clock starts. We originally had April 4th, and that is getting the budget in the paper by Friday, which isn't a problem. And we could do it, you know, Jen sent me a couple dates of April 3rd. The 4th, I think you're having a meeting, if you wanna do it at the beginning of that. You could do it then.
Is Gary gone that day, the 4th?
No,
Could be,
he might be.
that's all right. It's a matter of opening the public hearing and closing the public hearing and
So say.
answer any
before
questions.
4 p.m.?
Are we okay to do a couple, like 15 minutes before 4? Is that enough time if you do like 3:45?
It's a great plan.
You don't expect really need email, do you?
Never mind. No.
Does everybody want to do that?
Congratulations on the tax rate going down.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I wouldn't hold my breath on that one either.
Is everybody okay to do that at 3:45 on the 4th?
3:45 on the 4th.
It'll
Yeah,
take 2
that'll be
minutes.
open. Or do you want to do 3:50?
3:45.
We'll approve it before 4 because we go in closed session at 4. So then we need a motion then with the April 4th at 3:45.
I move to direct Gary Bingston to publish a proposed budget as presented for fiscal year 2018. Hold a public hearing on April 4th, 2018 at 3:45 p.m. in the board conference room of Adams Elementary School.
Second.
Gina,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
Okay. Next, we have the correspondence and announcements. We have the IASB workshop. Do we know a date on that, Rob, for the policy?
Yeah. I
Is
think
that the
it's
one with the
April
legal,
12th.
with school safety? I was just reading one today.
That could be, that is something, but.
If you're interested, let Rob know and he'll hold the
April.
date. And we have a noon meeting that day, so.
Yeah, are we doing interviews
Yeah.
that day, right?
And then to go over kind of the upcoming list that we have March 29th at 12:30 in here, closed session for AD screening. April 4th, again at 3:45, we'll start with the budget hearing, right? And then we'll go,
Sorry, can you back up just a second? See some
you
March,
can't type that fast.
I was just reviewing, March 29th, you said it's
At
12:30?
12:30 in here, closed session.
Okay.
That's, are we actually interviewing people that?
No, that's the screening.
That's
Oh,
fine.
okay.
We screen.
Oh,
Fresh
how much time we taking
candidates.
to do that?
Yeah. He had down a couple hours.
2 hours, okay.
So expect beer till at least 2:30 that day.
Yeah. And that's an early out day for kids if you need to arrange something. And then April 4th, 3:45, we'll do the budget hearing. 4 o'clock, closed session for the first screening.
Two more.
Are you ready?
No. And how long do we expect the screenings to last?
That was like the half an hour per candidate.
Yeah, so it
4 to
depends
8,
on how.
depending on how many candidates we pre-screen.
And then April 12th at noon, and that's the long one. That'll also be closed session. It'll be different than the superintendent. It'll be closed session because it's just, the AD, all the board members will be in one.
That's for AD.
Yeah.
And you expect it to go for 4 or 5 hours?
He said, give them 2.
Okay. So then there's 2-ish.
And then we have our next regular board meeting, April 16th at 5:30.
Birthday.
It's your
Yeah,
birthday?
some good retreats.
We should, huh?
At Adams.
Any suggestions for the next board meeting?
I'm supposed to do a 5th grade orientation at 6 p.m. on the 16th. For my son that's gonna be at St. Lawrence.
So do
Yeah,
we,
just transfer them to Carroll.
we'll just do our enrollment papers while you're here.
We'll take care of that.
Save myself some money.
Do you wanna look at calendars and we can see if we wanna move it to a different,
Yeah, I
Wednesday?
mean, we do,
Pick a day that's raining in that time period, and I'll move it.
I know you're
So, I mean,
really,
mine, at that time, I can't tell you, it's just so totally weather dependent,
what's the,
but I can always be available on the phone one way or the other.
well, I mean, we could keep it as it is and I could just jump out for a little bit and then come back and, I mean, if that's easier for everybody.
what's bills, when do you have to go? The bills, okay,
It'll be that day, by that day.
by that date.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's early.
Yeah, it's an early meeting, so I mean, you
You
could move it.
meet
to-
any day that week. I wouldn't get too far into the next week, but
Do you wanna move it like to this 17th?
18th works better for me than
18th.
17th. That Wednesday.
That's good for me, if it's good for everybody but Brad.
We're not gonna plan.
Yeah,
on
you
using
can't
it.
plan around me on that, so that's, it doesn't make any difference to me.
Is it good for you,
yeah.
Which day you
Rob?
looking at?
18th?
18th, that Wednesday,
Yeah.
April?
Golf week hasn't started yet.
Yeah, that's fine.
Leave it at 5:30.
5:30 at the 18th?
Thanks, guys.
Can we get a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.